welcome to another episode of Reptile Fight Club. I'm Justin Julander, and here with me is Bob Rock, Mr. Rob Stone. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, excited to be here. Really good.
Yeah, I'm dragging a little. We had our last water polo practice tonight, and we had some games on Tuesday. This national player was rolling through town, so he came and played with us, and man, he was tough to guard. It was some fun games though. Yeah. And he was kind of taking it easy on us because his last shot, he put the ball through the net. Like he threw it through the goal, like through the net of the goal. So I'm like, whoa, he was holding back, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I'm a little worn out this week. And then my daughter's got me out running. So my legs are killing me. I can't hardly walk up and down stairs. So you got to ease into those things when you're my age. I can't just jump up and run 3 miles and be okay. I forget that sometimes, my brain doesn't know how old I am, I guess, but what do you do?
Even despite the big birthday jamboree.
Yeah. I thought I would be in somewhat, walking shape. I don't think so. I think the trip that we did with my little Western Australia trip in there, I think I walked more on that one. I think I put in about 130 miles or so, and then this last one was about 100 or just over 100, based on kind of the Apple tracking or whatever it does on you. So yeah, good time. So yeah, not running shape though, and I guess not swimming shape either, because that took me a little while to get back into too. We didn't do much swimming in Central Australia, a little bit, but not much. Ellery Big Hole was a nice respite from the heat. It was nice and cold. So yeah, well, we're happy to have Joe DeStefano with us tonight, and grateful for him to come on and bring a topic with him. So we'll be getting into the topic here in a bit, but welcome to the podcast, Joe. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. So you do a podcast yourself or a YouTube show?
Yeah, it's a show on YouTube /podcast. It goes everywhere. It's called Collurid Corruption. It's a Collurid related podcast where I just have a bunch of guests on and we talk about their collections, what they're doing, and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, I got to admit, I'm not too great on keeping up on the Kluber podcast. I'm interested in them, but I don't keep many. So, I guess I've got enough, but I'll have to check it out. So I'll get on there.
I always say big creds to CCR, because they're some of the guys that, inspired me to do my own from like my own perspective. So cool. Yeah, big shout out to those guys.
Yeah.
On the network.
I mean, I've listened to a few. There's probably I should listen to more. Sorry, Zach, but yeah. All right. Well, let's hear how kind of you fit into herpetoculture.
Yeah. So right now, I mean, I have a decent collection. I'd say most of my collection is made up of Texas rat snakes and Asian colubrids and ball pythons. Nice. Is the gist of what I have. Texas rat snakes were my first love in the hobby. It was the first snake I ever got. I still have my first snake. She's 15 years old this year. Yeah. So, been keeping for a while, but more so on a serious collection for the last going on 4 years now. It was just a matter of being living with my parents, not really having the space. When I moved down to Florida a few years ago is when I was really able to expand the collection a bit more. But I've been loving reptiles since I'm 10 years old. So it's been a long road to get where I'm at, but yeah, happy to be here.
Nice. So you're currently in New York? Is that correct?
I am. Yeah. Okay. I just moved back
out there.
I'm still kind of learning my new room, like the environment and stuff. I'm learning it's a lot drier now, because I was down in Florida and I was keeping in my garage. So ambient humidity was great for everything that I kept. Not so much here. So I'm still trying to figure all that out, keeping the room temperature stable. Luckily enough, where I moved into, I have each room actually has its own little thermostat. It's oil heat.
Nice.
Older house here on Long Island. So I'm able to control this room and keep it a bit warmer than the rest of the apartment, which is cool. It's also my little home office because I work from home. So not too bad, but definitely got to figure out this environment. I know brew mating will be a lot easier for next year, so
Right.
that's a plus on the
Yeah.
Kluivert side of things.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we know that. We're out in the West. Like we just had snow today, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of gone a little crazy lately.
Coming tonight
Is
over here.
it? It's headed your way
Yeah.
next. Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, it kind of turned into rain later in the day, but yeah, it started out pretty snowy this morning, and then yeah, what do you do? I guess that's the fun of living in Utah/Colorado. Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, that's I it seems like, Florida's kind of like the, herp keeping mecca or whatever. Like a lot of people down there,
I would
uh,
say so. Yeah.
keepers weird.
There's
Did
a
you?
lot out there.
Uh-huh.
Just a big on the full scale of the reptile hobby and industry. It's just huge. Florida's a mecca. I mean, when has it not been? I feel like it's
Hmm.
always been the center of attention when it comes to even just imports. Like
Right.
the biggest breeders are down in the southeast and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, I'm back here. This is where I grew up for the most part. I was over in New York City where I grew up, and now I'm on Long Island. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
Seems like there's a pretty decent herp community out in New York as well. Like some of the
Yeah, I
uh,
would say so. I don't know the Northeast, I would say as well, because
yeah.
like I was saying, when I really dove into gaining this collection, it was all while I was down in Florida. So most of the connections I've made over the last few years have all been
Yeah.
Florida related for the
Uh,
most part.
yeah.
Um
Nice.
definitely would like to meet some more Northeasterners.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know as many on the East Coast. I'm kind of more doing shows on the West Coast and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But through uh, the Morelia Pythons guys, I've kind of met quite a few more East Coast breeders, and yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
cool. Um, but yeah, it seems like almost a world away in some ways.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's cool though. Yeah. So, what's your favorite species you keep?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because I said like the Texas rat snakes, those are my one true love. I think they're an
Mhm.
underrated species in the hobby as a whole. They just come so variable in so many different colors. But man, I really love the Asian colubrids too. Rhino rat snakes are amazing. I know Rob knows that. I love rhino rat snakes now that I have them. Um, I keep some of the bamboo rat snake species too,
Okay.
which are all great. So it's hard to pick a favorite. I'll say Texas rats to make it easy, but the other two are definitely up there.
Yeah. No, it's always good to go with your kind of first love. I think I,
Yeah,
I feel the same
yeah,
way about jungle carpets, Centralian pythons, that kind of things. They were kind of what got me into keeping Australian reptiles for the most part. Uh,
yeah.
cool. Well, I don't know. I guess we can dive into our fight topic tonight, unless you got any other cool things you want to bring by us. But
No, but I mean, before we get started, one, I really enjoy your guys' show. I picked it up more recently, I'd say,
mhm.
in the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year, but I really enjoy it and happy to be on here. I know you guys were asking for some topics, so I was happy to kind of lend this one and come on here with you guys. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's nice of you to say. Yeah, we appreciate uh, listeners out there. It's always fun to know somebody's listening to our
Yeah.
our ramblings and nonsense.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, tonight we're going to talk about the reptile industry and as if there's some misleading behavior in the reptile industry, or if everybody's above board and doing the best they can. So yeah, it's a good question, because I think a lot of people getting into the hobby. I think that it's kind of a mixed bag. There's like a lot of excitement and you just kind of go crazy and start getting once you're able to start getting, well, maybe I'll save this for the discussion, but
Yeah.
I'm launching into it already and we haven't even flipped a coin yet. Okay, well, this first flip will be between me and Rob to see who gets the pleasure of debating you tonight. So as usual, Rob can make the call.
I'll say tails.
Tails again, man. I am losing every
Tails
flip these
again.
days. Yeah. What would you like to do?
I hate to do it to you twice in a row, but man, you were already going. I'm ready to listen to you and then
All
jump
right.
in because you got feelings on this. So
I don't know if the listeners will agree with you, but all right. I'll take the topic tonight. So, all right, Joe, why don't you call this one?
Heads.
Heads. It's tails. Well, I got one
All
out
right.
of 2 there. So, I'll take the everybody's above board and doing not selling a false bill of goods. No
Yeah,
misleading
that's cool.
behavior.
I planned on taking the tough conversation here.
Okay. All right. Well, and again, I kind of launched into it, but being kind of old and jaded, being around the hobby, I guess it'd be good to get a fresh take on, coming into the hobby and what you've experienced. So I think that's going to be very valuable to hear that side of it from you. So,
yeah, I mean, just for context, sorry, Joe. Just for context on this, I know we were chatting a little bit about beforehand, and sort of what Joe was expressing was stuff that I felt more I could relate to, or the experiences that I could relate to 25 or 30 years ago when I saw that a lot, for sure. I could understand certainly where someone would have that perspective of saying, I am being fed this stuff. And maybe you're, at that point, you're not rejecting it, right? You're eating it up. But that was sort of my perspective more so 25 or 30 years ago. Whereas today, I don't really even see that content to reject it. And I think maybe that's just a function of who I'm talking to and stuff like that. So as you say, Dr. J, I think it'll be great to get Joe's perspective, both from sort of different species, maybe is a function of that, and then how much you're engaging with people that are actively selling stuff as well.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. I'm going to have you lead us off and kind of start us out.
Okay. So I want to preface this whole thing by saying I do see both sides of it.
Sure.
Because I don't want everyone to go ahead and think that I'm like
all
super
negative and
yeah. So, obviously I'm on the younger end. I'm 24 years old. So I've been in this hobby. I've been keeping snakes since I'm 10. And I've seen a lot over the years. I worked at a pet store first, and then, like I said, I really jumped into the industry within the last 3-4 years or so.
Okay.
That said, and the question I originally posed was, do breeders sell newer keepers / upcoming breeders like a pipe dream about the industry in terms of how much money they can make, things like that? Do they sell them this grandiose dream?
Right.
And the reason why I do think this is true, and perhaps this is more on a species level, like Rob was kind of saying, because the more I see things on social media, the more I look into things, the more I do see this kind of behavior and the way people kind of fall trapped to it. One, I'll come right out of the gates and say it, the ball python industry. I mean, and if we're going to rope ball pythons, we might as well take our like probably most popular pets. So that goes for ball pythons, like crusty geckos. I'm going to rope hognose in there too, because hognose are booming right now in terms of all that's coming out and the prices and stuff like that. So these breeders that were able to get in early, make a big investment, early 2000s, they were able to stack up these morphs. They're able to show a very grandiose picture of the collection they've built over the years, the type of animals they're hitting, the type of money they're spending on new animals, the type of facilities they're building, and things like that. And then, you have these fresh faces. And I would say a lot of this started with COVID, when a lot of people had an influx of money. They were also bored at home. And a bunch of people with money that wanted to like do something with it. But, and still we see it to this day, a bunch of people that will come in the game, spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, all these racks, and build up this giant collection over 6 months to a year, that have a bigger collection than I do. And I'd say I have about 40 snakes right now, and they built up a ball python collection that's bigger than my whole collection of snakes combined in under a year. And the way these people will talk on social media, and the way they present themselves is that they think, oh, because I spent all this money in this short amount of time, I'm going to be like these big dogs. I'm going to be the next guy up.
Mhm.
But with that also said, and now, if you look on Facebook in any reptile Facebook group, what are you seeing almost every day is people selling out of their collections for pennies on the dollar of probably what they bought them for a couple years ago.
Mhm.
What I'd say I've been able to do personally is like read between those lines of people trying to sell that dream to you. Um, and a lot of people seem to be like very literally bragging about money, which I think in this hobby is just silly.
Mhm.
Um, because it shouldn't be about money, it should be about the animals. Like if you
Right.
like the animals, it should be about the animals. But it's just really unfortunate what I've seen over time. And with some of these keepers, and I'm in these group chats and different things, and I can't help but notice this stuff all the time. And it's hard to call people out on it because I think they've become almost so delusional in their thinking about what they're building, and they think they're going to rise to this top so fast when really it, like I said, the initial of this conversation is they've been kind of sold a pipe dream. It's like
Mm.
you can't be the next Justin Kabelka in 3 years off
Yeah.
of a fresh collection. It's just not going to happen.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
it's
I'll
always
leave it at that for now.
it's definitely always tricky when the money's involved, and I think a lot of it is overhyped, and like you said, they build these collections, or at least the big guys are showing their huge collections and all the racks and all the stuff that they've accumulated, and I think people forget that, like you said, Rome wasn't built in a day, and that this takes a lot of time and effort and continual striving to, most of them don't start out as professional breeders. You know what I mean? They've
Yeah.
had a day job for 20 years and then eventually are able to transition to like a full-time breeder. But, when you're looking at it with the, like you said, kind of those hoop dreams, and sometimes you can't warn somebody enough or whatever, like they're going to do what they want to do, like they see it, like,
Yeah.
no way I'm going to make this happen, and I think that's the best warning is, like, if you're doing it for the money, there's a lot easier and better ways to make money than to breed reptiles.
Yeah.
Can you make money off of reptiles? Of course. And can some people do it full time? Yeah, but at the same time, it's like it is a lot of work, and it takes a while to build a reputation, to build
Oh yeah.
a trusted clientele or whatever that trusts you to not kind of screw them over and just be making a buck off them. Are there people that come and go like the wind? Yeah, there are, and it's usually the
Yeah.
people who are in it for the money. Usually the people who've loved reptiles their whole lives, get in it for the right reasons and work with the species that they care about, and are going to keep whether they make them a dollar or not, are usually the ones that kind of have that staying power because they don't get caught up in the, I've got to make a lot of money and I got to be a pro breeder and all these kind of things. So I think,
Yeah.
on the one hand, yeah, there is some kind of manipulation a little bit, or kind of capitalizing on their excitement. I'm sure there's plenty of breeders out there that get those dollar signs in their eyes each time a new fresh face walks in the door and
Yeah.
is really excited about reptiles. And really there is a danger to that, where we kind of eliminate those up and coming keepers and ruin their excitement by screwing them over that way. So I think it's bad
Yep.
for the industry, as a whole, because you're,
Definitely.
like you said, making it about money, making it about making money off of new, inexperienced, and potentially somewhat naive, new keepers. But it is kind of a business, and that seems to be the the key to being a good business person, is screwing people over to make a buck. Like, I don't know how to put that differently. I do not like business. I'm a terrible businessman. So, I always knew that I was going to keep my day job and just do this as a hobby, because, I don't want to have to make those choices to sell an animal because I need to feed my family. You know what I mean? But hey,
Yeah.
with all
And
the science jobs going out the window, maybe I will have to be
You
a
have to transition.
professional breeder. We'll see what happens.
and just going off of that, an example I could very literally pull up that happened a couple weeks ago in a group chat I'm in. Someone was asking about like, oh, like cool colubrids that they could get into, or they were saying for their brother, because this guy is a ball python person and
Mhm.
he has spent a lot of money. He's like, oh, my brother wants to get a couple cool colubrids that would be like good for the market also, but not that hard to take care of. And I
Yeah.
immediately replied, I said, dude, if that's the goal, don't buy them. I said,
Mhm.
stop. I stopped it in his tracks. And unfortunately, I don't think he quite got the message.
Yeah.
But I was like, if that's what you want, and it was actually rhino rat snakes. I was like, dude, if that's what you want them for, please stop. I'm
Mhm.
like, that's not what rhino rat snakes are for. You're not gonna make a buck off of rhinos if you don't really enjoy them and really like keeping them,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it takes years to get them up to size and hard to establish babies. It's like it's not the easiest thing. Like we're not talking about corn snakes here, but
Mhm.
rhino rats have a nice price tag to them, a nice stable price tag to them. So apparently that's attractive to someone who wants to invest in rhino rat snakes.
Yeah, I hate that term of investment in the reptile industry. It definitely
Yeah.
smacks of pyramid scheme or whatever. Like, hey, if you get five of your buddies to invest in this project, pretty soon you'll be making a lot of money too. And I do, I have there been 20,000, 50,000, $80,000 ball pythons sold? Yeah. But how many
Yeah.
of those are actual cash sales, and how many are like, I will trade you 30 of my, whatever morphs
Yeah.
for that one
Yeah.
snake, and so like I think a lot of these guys do build their collection through that trading power and having rare or desirable genes or some combo or whatever. So I mean, there are definitely people making a lot of money or have been making a lot of money on ball pythons, but you do notice that they also start to branch out and to try to get other things going too, because that's kind of a roller coaster. It kind of comes and goes, and you have to really be on the cutting edge, and there are very few people that can continually ride that wave. The Justin Bilkas are kind of the exception to the rule, and
Yeah.
they're on top of that pyramid, and it's hard to get on top of that pyramid if like.
Yeah. And even speaking for myself, I mean, I'll be completely honest. I did feed into the dream a little bit when I was building my collection.
Mhm.
Starting in 2021, I was in Florida. So when I lived in Queens, New York City, you legally can't have pythons. So at the
Yeah.
pet store I worked at, um, I had zero interaction with pythons like ever.
Mhm.
So it was just not something I was familiar with. It was always colubrids. I used to think they were dumb till I got my first one in 2021. And I still think they're pet rocks and they could be dumb sometimes. But I fed into it. I was like, whoa, you could do all this cool stuff. And I was seeing on YouTube and I was seeing this stuff until I kind of put my brain together and I was like, okay, you can't catch up to these guys and you're going to be playing in the rat race forever. So over the last year, I've actually slimmed my ball python collection down significantly down to just one project that I very much enjoy,
Mhm.
like a double recessive project. Um, and I'm good with that. I'm happy with that. I don't have to chase anybody. I get to work what I like with my limited animals with the genes I like, and I get to be done at that. And now I get to have a little bit bigger of a colubrid collection where not to say I don't have fun with the ball pythons, but where I can have, I'd say, more fun with,
Yeah.
and the other things I enjoy. So I'd say I was in that spot of I was being sold the pipe dream, just overall, not by any specific person, but just by the overall everything.
Mhm.
And I kind of, like I said, I opened my eyes and I saw the light, and I was like, this is not the way to go.
Yeah,
So
this is, and it's not for everybody. I mean, it's not for me for sure. Like
yeah,
I mean, I got into the morph game and all that kind of stuff. I produced the first zebra jungles in the country, and selling a $5,000 snake is not easy. it takes a lot of effort. It's almost like
Yeah.
if you just maintain the wild types, I found that they're very consistent. They hold their prices for the most part. You're not having like, they have their fans, and that's always going to happen. Somebody's going to come along, a jungle carpet python, and say, "Ooh, I want one of those." Like it's just a consistent thing. And if I'm not trying to like produce 300-400 snakes at a time, then it's manageable, and I make my sales, and I can pay for the rodent chow or whatever, and just keep the ball rolling, and pay for a couple trips to Australia here and there. That's all I need, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and also it helps too if I can contribute to the bills once in a while. That really justifies it, at least to my wife. So I do think you can have a profitable business, or have something that kind of
100%.
does the right thing. But I think there definitely is that aspect of it. And to me, it seems like it kind of came along with the morph thing. Like as soon as morphs entered it, it just kind of went nuts in regards to, it's all about the money and all this money you can make. Where before it was like people who just really liked a certain species or species group and wanted to work with them and produce some, and then they find people, like-minded people who like those things too, just because they were what they were, not because of some heritable gene they had, some mutant thing. So I think that brought that kind of negative element a little bit more. Not that people weren't getting screwed over by certain people in the hobby. I mean, that's like a tried and true part of the reptile industry, to get screwed over by some big name,
Oh yeah, touting
they have some rare reptile that you just really want to get your hands on, and then you find out, they just absconded with all this money or whatever. So I don't think that's going away anytime soon, because we get so excited about rarity and about difficult to acquire things that we're willing to risk that money and just watch it go away. So
well, and even absent that fraud, right? Sort of any sale, particularly in the context of things being marketed in pairs or trios, it's always kind of forward sold that way. To me, the part that is always understated in that, understated, is the time and stability that would be required to effectuate that, right? In the sense of, in only 3 or 4 years. Well, Joe, how many times have you moved in 3 or 4 years? Especially a lot of the people that are kind of most amenable to the pitch maybe are young folks. I know that's maybe part of me saying 25 or 30 years ago, but that's your least stable time of life. Whereas the people who have these huge impressive collections, well, they've been, I know Justin, it calls to mind Nick, right? Who's been in his same house for how many, 15, 20 years or something like that. And it's like, that's a level of stability that most of the people that are buying animals from him don't have, that's just a truth of the matter. And I would say the other thing, just here, hearing both sides how this is going, is that, reptiles are unlike most commodities in the sense that their theoretical potential to produce value is crazy high. But if you're situated that you need to move them today, either based on your own sort of desire or your circumstance or whatever it is, they could be literally worthless, or the cost of literal meat. They could be $1 a pound, or they could have the potential with, if you didn't have to do that and you could effectuate it, they could be worth, produce $5,000 this year, but if you had to sell them today, they're $5, that sort of thing. Most things aren't like that. Even amongst, like, I was thinking as, I was putting that thought together, it was like, well, how different is this than collecting coins or stamps or something like that? And the answer is, well, you don't expect your coins or stamps to make more coins or stamps. So they might, have an intrinsic value or, an extrinsic value to that community, but it's not a further question, they'll produce more coins.
Mm-hmm. And they're becoming more and more rare as the time goes by, rather than more common, which happens in the reptile
making more
industry.
of them into the world. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and the guy sitting on top is the one making all the money, and people underneath have to try to keep up. Not that you can't do it that way, and you can still make it work, but just more difficult.
Yeah. And what I actually find quite fascinating about the business of this hobby and this industry, going separate from what I'm talking about is I feel like the guys who stay in their lane and kind of do their own things and they're zoned in and not worried about what the hell everyone else is doing actually do so well compared to most other people. Because and I won't name names, but I see other fellow colubrid breeders who just sell because they produce high quality, the best animals all the time, and they always have them available, and people want them.
Mhm.
But they're not chasing some market. They're not trying to copy someone else. They are doing their own thing. And even myself, like I've learned that like I made some, I'll call them higher end Texas rat snakes over the last couple of years at prices you don't see any other Texas rats on Morph Market posted at. And I sat on them for a bit, but they sold because like that's not, it wasn't me trying to like chase something special. It was me producing what I wanted to produce, and
Right.
I found the right buyers for them and they sold. But and with that, to go against my argument, but I wasn't trying to sell people a dream either. I stated what the animals were, this is what it was, and if people want them, that it is what it is, you
Yeah.
know?
I think there's some really good examples of that out there too, where they're kind of champions for different species or different animals, and their excitement and their I guess productivity, if you want, putting out information on that species, making it seem like it's something that you might be able to do,
Yeah.
making it kind of a reality, or helping you understand what they need to thrive and do well for you. Those are the ones that seem to have staying power and kind of create their own market and do very well in this hobby. And they're also the types that aren't trying to fool people into giving them their money to make a quick buck. They want the
Yeah.
animals to go to a good home and things like that. So I think
100%.
that's the key to being a good breeder. I think is being able to first keep the animals happy and healthy and well, but also make sure that the people you're sending them to also have a good chance of succeeding with those animals.
Yeah.
um, you know
And the thing about you know I guess my side of the argument, what are like, where does this take place? It's the animals that are the most common, the easiest to breed with the most morphs possible, which makes them the most marketable
yeah.
animals out there because of all those qualities. So that's where it's so interesting how the hobby almost divides itself on this like uber business end of things, and then you have like the semi business but like more so hobby oriented
Yeah.
side of the coin, if you get what I mean.
Right. And I mean, you talk to everybody at a reptile show, and probably 90% of them are going to say, I have a ball python or a crested gecko or a leopard gecko, like the big
Yeah.
5 or 10 or whatever it is, boa constrictor, they're just all kind of the same answers. You very rarely hear somebody, oh, my first snake was, a pygmy
A
python
carpet
or a
python,
carpet,
or yeah.
yeah, even something like a carpet python that seems kind of commonplace to me, like a jungle carpet or something. You don't hear that very often. It's always the same kind of mainstays, and yeah, maybe that's changing a little bit, and I hope that people branch out from those basic things. But it seems like, oh, I got this ball python from my buddy, and so I might as well find something to pair it up with and produce some, because then I can make some money off this pair I've got. That's that kind of that following the money thing. Like, oh, if I breed them, then I can sell them and have enough money to feed them. And it kind of, like you said, it kind of gets into that pipe dream. But I think that's more on the keeper side, where they see that, oh, people are breeding these and selling these, and they just assume it's as easy as throwing them together and producing babies, and then they're just going to fly out the door. What
Yeah.
so maybe
And
it's
well,
more
the
of
thing
a,
is,
yeah.
sometimes it is
Yeah.
as easy as throwing them in the tub and producing them. The problem is when they can't sell them.
Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah.
right. It was that last part of that last step
They're
there.
not
That's
going to
the hard
fly
part.
out the door. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do. Like, I mean, my first breeding project was kind of an accident. I was in a pet shop and I saw this bearded dragon scratching at the glass and she looked very fat. And I said, I'll take that one. And I took her home and she laid a clutch of eggs. And I took
Nice.
I raised the babies up for a few weeks. I took them back to the pet store. They bought the babies from me for $50 a piece. Like, this is a while ago, of course. You can't do that anymore. But, and I'm like, whoa, yeah, that was easy. And then that kind of
Yeah.
tricked me into like, now I need to buy up all the bearded dragons in the area. And then I kind of stopped thinking, or I neglected to think about things like biosecurity. And, am I just going to throw in a bunch of random bearded dragons from a bunch of different pet stores? And then all of a sudden, they're not thriving. They're getting, different enteric pathogens and things like that, and they kind of just slowly faded and didn't do great. So I learned my lesson the hard way, and but I also had a kind of that easy start as well. But then the next project I bought, I made sure to get healthy captive bred animals, not just some random pet store animal. And so I do think that naivety and that excitement of the keeper can also contribute to this, where that nobody's
Yeah.
going to tell them, this might not be for you, or you may not want to, necessarily produce 100 of these or something, that kind of thing, where they're just like, well, everybody else breeds them, so they must be popular, so I'm going to breed them. And then they find out, oh, you have to have a name to sell these things, or else you're selling them for $20. I'll bring crested geckos to a show and I'll put them on my table for $20 and they don't sell. And people are walking by with crested geckos that they paid $350 for because it came from a well-known breeder and it has some little bit of orange on the
Yeah.
tail or something. You're like, okay, yeah, great. This thing could be bright red. I don't like, and nice looking, but yeah, go ahead and spend $350 because I'm not going to tell you differently.
Well, and not only the name, right? That is a huge part of it, but the time and enthusiasm
Yep.
to engage and make those sales, and even heck, go to FedEx and ship them.
Right.
All those steps. Maintain the shipping supplies and all
Mhm.
those. Sort of that infrastructure to facilitate that. That yeah, you definitely don't even think about.
Right. Yeah. And mine are just like office pets that won't stop producing or something.
Right.
Like, yeah. So, but it's an interesting thing. And, frankly, like crested geckos are pretty amazing pets and they're pretty cool animals. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that people appreciate them and that get excited about them. I just, I guess it's been so long. I can't remember what it's like to get into something or some group of animals. It's
Right.
I've just been doing the same thing for so long. But I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I still know what it's like to find a cool new species or animal or something and get those in, and I still have those opportunities every once in a while. I've got something coming soon. I'm really excited. But
Yeah.
anyway,
No, and I could totally appreciate that point of view from you because yes, you're established, you've been doing this for a long time and you've been keeping relatively most of the same stuff. It's where I see this is, it's a lot of these new keepers and I happen to be in these circles and I'm on social media a lot, so I see a lot of just stuff out there.
yeah.
So I don't know.
No, I
But
mean, yeah, it's totally valid. And what other warnings or what other things have you seen where breeders are acting unscrupulous? Any other kind of things that you would want to warn
um
new keepers about? I guess
hmm.
Well,
maybe
I
you
think
can.
one thing to naturally bring up here, and
I'd
maybe it,
um
sorry, Joe. And maybe it naturally
no,
fits into
go
this
ahead.
conversation of like the sort of sales pitch or someone who's gone through a transition around a sales pitch. And maybe I'm about to touch the third rail. We'll see. But is, someone who used to be kind of pitching that message maybe 25, 30 years ago, about 30 years ago about like an investment in the animal and these sorts of things, now has resorted to juggling them.
Yeah,
So it's no
right.
longer trying to pitch them. It's just like a sort of, it's gone pure vaudeville or, P.T. Barnum or something. Gone from being like, hey, this, is sort of presenting the super sciencey sort of setup and like, oh, with this one rack, you look at what you can do and all this sorts of things. And now we're here 25, 30 years down the track, and it's literally juggling.
Yeah. Kind of maybe glad that I wasn't at that show. That was a local show to me, and I was almost gonna go vend that, but I thought maybe not. And then I didn't have much to sell anyway. But yeah, that was sketchy. I don't know what
it's just weird, right? It's the antithesis of actually what we're talking about, right? That's the anti-sales pitch, right? That's saying like,
I don't care about this.
You perceive them as value less.
Yeah. All this is a dollar sign to me.
Which is sad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Joe, what did you have to say before?
No, I don't even know where I was going to go.
Oh.
I was going to let Rob make that point.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. Yes, I was going to go back to your question of like, what else do I see? I think people is, again, I'm very much speaking from the ball python side of things because that's what I see a lot of, but I think people get hung up on the dollar amount that they'll see priced on a certain morph or a certain combo a lot and take that and like run with it. I think there's a lot of fake and like BS with a lot of that because I know for a fact that people will post up these high prices and then there's a lot of, you were kind of saying it before, like whether it's under the table dealings where it doesn't actually get sold at that price, or there was like a trade involved of some sort, trade plus cash or something like that. So I think that also doesn't really help things in terms of hyping things up. Like, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk crap on a show, but like the sunset morph with ball pythons, I think it's garbage. I think it doesn't look good. But they hold this high dollar value, which some people like it. And I can't tell you that you can't like it, but it browns out. Like it's not great. It's not good looking. So I can't understand why that price on that animal is justified in any sense. And normal sunsets anymore aren't that high price, but like combos with it are being priced. A sunset clown is just a simple double recessive. The lowest price one on Morph Market right now is $10,000, which is just crazy for how that animal ages into adulthood.
Right. I think too, people see that $10,000 price tag and say, oh, well, the ingredients are only this much. If I get a sunset and a clown, I can make sunset clowns and then I'll make it $10,000. What they don't understand is the person who made that sunset clown has potentially an army of sunset clown makers at their disposal that could go, later that year or early the next year or whatever, and produce 20 of them. And all of a sudden, instead of 10,000, they're 1,000 or 100 or whatever. And if you went, okay, well, I spent 1,000 on the ingredients and now, what am I, and I haven't even bred yet. And all of a sudden the price is down. I think those of us who have been around long enough, you see those high priced animals and they're already set to do their thing. Granted, people can produce ball pythons fairly early with a young male or something, but they still have to have that, those females that are older and ready to lay eggs and things like that. But it's just a race to the bottom, it seems, because the more that are produced, the lower they go. And then pretty soon, I remember the banana was probably the best example. They were 80 or 120,000 or something. And they dropped in one season from, 80,000
one weekend.
Right.
Barley has told me it was a Daytona weekend and the price jumped off a cliff just in that one weekend.
Because what people didn't know is that lots of people had bought, or gotten a couple of them, or so a few people shelled out the money first and got in line or whatever. Got them early and produced them quickly. And then they produced an army of them. And then all of a sudden, they probably made, I heard some people made millions of dollars in a show or something crazy like that, or several $100,000 in a single show because all they brought were, 20 banana ball pythons and sold them at ridiculous prices, or more, or 40 or something, some crazy number. But you got to know that that's kind of going on already. You've already missed the boat if the animal's been produced and has a $20,000 price tag, because the person who produced it is probably going to produce a lot more the next season, especially if they're extremely popular and they've done their math right and planned correctly. I don't know.
Although, Justin, I would say that the fact that they had 20 of them sitting on the table, right, is evidence that it's already too late, right? At least relative to that price point. That's the other part of it, right? Is everything comes down. There's some static sales point for everything, and I do think the morph thing maybe is the distortion on this, because plain normal Western hognose were $50. That was sort of the consistent price, and then which is not to discount the stuff Richard Evans was doing, but before sort of the front end of the mutations with the albinos and things, that was just sort of what they are. And so even at some point, and maybe that's today, maybe with the interest in hognose, it's not there yet, like a normal Western hognose will again come to be $50 plus inflation from to 1997 or whatever it'll be.
I want to say even a normal hog, they're like, I think they're closer to like even 100, right? Like 50 to $100, somewhere there. Yeah,
exactly right. Because that's the unstated part. Whenever anyone's like, "Oh, I used to buy these for $25 back in 1977," and it's like, sure, well, $25 in 1977 is now worth 140. So or whatever it is,
right? Yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be taken into account. Is and I think a lot of people have that in their mind, like, oh, this animal is this much money. I've been pretty shocked to see a lot of import animals that used to be commonplace now command, like a Bowen's python, they've always been kind of pricey, but $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 for an imported animal just seems insane. You know what I mean? Like, there's just such
especially
a chance.
Something that doesn't fit into the box, characteristically doing well.
Exactly. I guess people want them bad enough, and I think that's another kind of inflated, where you got some influencer that had one and everybody fell in love with them, and they're so mysterious and cool, and granted there is some truth to that, but at that price it's just so risky, because very few people have $12,000 or $20,000 that they can just throw down the toilet, if they buy an import and it dies. It just is shocking to see that. And then that also kind of prices people out that might do really well with them, or that have a knack to breed pythons or something. I've heard that a few times of some very capable python breeders, like, well, I could probably breed those, but I'm not paying 20 grand for a pair of them.
Well, and to do it seriously and have a chance, right? A pair is not a project,
not ideal, right?
That's the thing where it's like, okay, realistically, you probably need multiple males, and probably multiple sets of males with a female or whatever. So that, you don't need a pair at 20 grand. You need like 12
or
animals,
8 of them,
and
12 of them,
100 grand or whatever. And even then it's all speculative, and very few people are situated to just, as you say, put that on the shelf. And then, if I need to sell them tomorrow, I can get, this guy said he'd give me five grand for the, what I spent 100 grand for 6 weeks ago.
That's you see those people come and go sometimes, that just come in, drop insane amounts of money, and then like they're selling later for pennies on the dollar, because it's not an easy thing. It's work, and it's hard, and you have animals will die for no clear reason to you just like, or something, the seasons shift and your room overheats and you lose some animals that way, which that happened to me a couple weeks ago, and not a great thing. And you'd think I'd have it figured out by now. And like, it's just these weird, how do you control the weather? And you really need to think about those things, and that can, set you back a little bit. So, it's just, it's a tricky thing. And anybody that's trying to sell you on, like, all you have to do is throw these two animals together and you're a millionaire, like, that's buyer beware for sure. But, if somebody's legitimately excited about a certain project or animals or something like that, that's fine too. Like, I would hope that somebody breeding animals is excited about the animals. Now, if they're willing to, like, just, like, sell them to whoever comes along with the dollars in hand, that's a little something to watch out for too. Like you want to make sure that they're making sure the animals go to as good a home as possible. But why deprive somebody of being able to hold an animal just because you don't think they're ready or capable or whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also for newer keepers, and I'm not sure how many newer keepers listen to this show, but like there's certain like almost buzzwords that you can get off of what a seller is telling you to kind of see what they're trying to do. If they're just trying to sell you that animal,
Right.
or if they're going to help you out a little bit. Because I've had people do it to me, inquire on like a ball python or whatever, and say, well, I want to pair it with this. And I've been like, hey, that might not be your best idea. I would actually look for that. And I actually dissuaded them from buying my animal because they told me they wanted to do this. I was like, that probably wouldn't be your best bet. And that's what you have to look for. If someone says, oh, yeah, you could do this, this, and that, and it's not that realistic. And maybe it is depending on the animal, but I'm just kind of giving an example there of, sometimes you could get a feel based on the answers to your questions if you're
Right.
inquiring.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, I think that's a good sign if somebody's saying, hey, maybe this animal's not right for you, or maybe I check this guy out. He's got what you're probably looking for.
Yep.
Those are good signs of good breeders that have scruples and morals and all that kind of stuff, rather than trying to pitch you on what they have only, you see that a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something definitely to be aware of. Good point. I think too, we again, are you prepared to feed the offspring of your animals for, years in some instances, and be able to provide space for them if they don't sell immediately? Or are you going to panic and try to just sell them for whatever you can get? And, kind of, I guess you're giving somebody a good deal, but you're not really doing yourself any favors if you're going to spend a lot of money on animals. You've got to have, a plan. You've got to be able to provide for those animals, provide them space, food, all the things that they need, care, time, that kind of thing. Or else, what are you doing? Don't do it. If you want a pet, get a single animal and have a pet. If you want a breeding project, you've got to be prepared for what comes out of a breeding project if you're successful. And, you see so many people scrambling for racks or cages or something because they don't have anywhere to put the offspring, and, I mean, some of our good friends still do that. Owen McIntyre. Oh, sorry. I coughed a little there.
What I see a lot from like newer keepers, like the amassing a giant collection is a thing I just can't fathom, but on so many levels. Between the caging, that's one, like you said, then your feeding costs. I don't think people realize like how much exponentially your feeding bill goes up the more animals you add, and then especially once you start having babies, because it just takes it to a whole new level. Not that I've ever like struggled for it, but then you start to realize when you have babies, you're like, oh, I'm feeding this many rodents per week to this many animals, and you're kind of just like, oh, okay, like I'm spending a little more money now. So it's definitely it's a consideration to make when you get into this, is like, can I afford this? And then of course there's the time. Do you have the time to take care of your animals properly? Even with my 40 snakes, not that it's like it's a big job. I'm not spending hours a day cleaning or whatever, but like, when I got to get in there and clean, like it could take a while. When I'm doing full tub clean outs, like it takes me a while because I'm cleaning, disinfecting everything and all that stuff. So,
Yeah. I mean, the time and the effort that it takes, and especially if you're, like you said, growing a bigger and bigger collection, and that happens pretty imperceptibly because, it's easy to have a lot of interest. There's so many cool reptiles out there, and there's, a lot of fun to be had. Like I have to control myself better and that kind of thing. And sometimes you hold back on breeding up a lot of animals because you don't want a huge year. You kind of take it easy. And
Yeah.
probably best practices are if you've produced a group of animals and they haven't sold within that year, probably don't pair up the adults again. Like maybe wait until you sell the offspring of that and make sure you have that market before you start breeding them again and producing more of those animals.
Yeah. And I just want to say again, like I'm not trying to be negative. I bring these points up as things to think about. I love these reptiles. I'd get an even bigger collection if I could. Would it be responsible of me? Probably not. So I just say these things almost as a warning to any prospective buyers, is like, hey, you should think about these things before you do it. If you have the capacity to, no problem at all.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I mean, that's what we try to do here, is provide both sides and try to, make sure people are informed. Like that's on both sides of the coin, because, like you said, like I brought up, it's not always necessarily an unscrupulous breeder. It can also be just overwhelming excitement from the person getting them, and they're just not pacing themselves because, oh, I just got my own place and I have all this room, I have an extra room, I can buy all these things and make all this money. And I think we all maybe went through that a little bit when we started. And looking back and going, well, I probably shouldn't have done this and that. I mean, I think I kind of grew it slowly. I wasn't going into debt necessarily. I guess I did maybe for a couple projects, but at first it was kind of like, okay, let me get this species. If I can breed them and sell them, then I'll use the money to get my next project and things like that. And it can snowball, especially if you go to a reptile show and you see all these crazy cool animals that you've never seen before, you just heard about, and you're like, oh, I could probably keep those, and it can work, but it can also be kind of a treadmill where you're like, just get in over your head, and it's hard to. Yeah.
The debt thing is another huge one, like you're talking about. I mean, some of these people are leveraging so much to get these animals, and I'm just like, and I'm like a semi-personal finance addict in terms of YouTube content my own self, and I'm just like, how can you do this to yourself? I'm like, it's so irresponsible. It's like, if you have, like, you should spend the money if you have the money, especially on animals, on something that is not a necessity. Like these things, like these are not necessities. I don't think people should be taking out that much irresponsibility on their own personal life just to have it.
Right.
The animal will come back around. It's like, you're not going to lose it forever.
Right.
For the most part.
It was legitimate that people were they're putting second mortgages on their house to buy ball pythons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was happening as a real thing.
Yeah. I know when we were, hopefully Ben's okay with me saying this, but when we were getting into some of the projects, Ben used some of his student loan money, or maybe it was a grant or something, like he was getting some money for school, but he used it on some carpet python morphs, and we ended up producing and kind of making that money back for him and everything to be able to spend on school, and he got out of school okay and everything, but so it didn't turn out too sketchy or anything, but so I guess I've been guilty of that as well. And when the monitors, like when Ackies were first, lots of money, and I thought, oh, I really want to keep those, and I could probably breed them, and all that kind of stuff. And I borrowed some money from my parents and bought some trio of Ackies, and I got some eggs out of them, but then we moved and the eggs crashed and didn't hatch, and I never got any hatchlings out of them. And so then I had and then after I bought them, like 2 weeks later, the price halved for these animals. And I'm like, oh crap, that's not good. It was just kind of a train wreck thing. And I lost, money on that project for sure. Those hoop dreams are definitely real, and it may not have anything to do with the breeder. It might just be myself thinking, oh, I could do that. I'm a good keeper, or that,
right.
And monitors are a lot of work. Like they're a lot of effort, and it's not easy to produce a lot of monitors too. You gotta,
That's the time, stability, and infrastructure again,
Exactly.
where it's
Yeah.
like it seems easy. And
Yeah.
even on maybe, going back to your original bearded dragon, right? On
Mhm.
the scale of one, or a pair of animals, or even in that
Yeah.
case, a gravid female, right? That's one thing. But as you try and scale up, the
Mhm.
need for, time, stability, and infrastructure just
Yep.
expands exponentially. It's not even linearly, right? Relative
Right.
to that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think if you're a part-time breeder, snakes are great. Lizards are a lot more difficult because you got
Yeah.
to feed them more frequently, and you got to give them lights and UV and all sorts of things that might raise the
Your
cost.
power bill.
Exactly. Yeah, you're paying a lot more to heat them and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's definitely things to consider when getting into these projects. Are monitors cool? Of course they are. There's very few animals that are cooler than a monitor lizard, and I don't know. I did it again. I bought another group of Ackies and got more eggs out of them that crashed and I didn't hatch and ended up selling them off again. It's like, I don't know. You'd think I'd learn, but I think next time I get any kind of monitor, it's going to be after retirement so I can give them the attention and time they need. I mean,
And
I
even then,
enjoyed
you'll be
keeping
going
them.
out herping and traveling and
Right.
stuff. So
Yeah.
still,
Yeah. I
still
still
won't
have
work.
that issue. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Maybe
So
some
you have
things
them
are
to enjoy
just,
them,
yeah.
but not
Yeah.
not with the thought of, okay, this is gonna,
Yeah.
no, I'm gonna pay it off with this, or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you have to be able to afford the animals with, maybe some reptile money from some stuff you've, sold or whatever. And then, then it's kind of almost like play money because you're, bringing money into your
Yeah.
reptile account and then it goes out to buy more reptiles. You're not taking away from your family's finances to buy some of these projects. That's
Exactly.
probably never a really great idea because if it doesn't work, what's the consequence? If it does work, you might have a little extra money here or there to throw back into the pot. But if it doesn't work, yeah, that could mean your kids are going hungry or you're going into debt more because of this, like it can have some bad consequences. So do it the smart way, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny too, like when people buy projects, again, kind of that excited naivety, like they'll get a group of animals and then they realize maybe even pretty quickly, like, oh, this isn't really for me. Like, I don't even really like keeping these. The influencer on Instagram made them look so cool, and I got them, and they're just kind of brown and ugly, and they bite and they crap on me, and like, why do I have these? And I got to get rid of them as quickly as I can. And so that can,
But I can give respect to people who start very small and then they realize that and they're like, okay, that's not for me.
yeah.
You get a couple animals and you could do that and make that educated decision. Kudos.
Mhm.
Kudos to you, like that you were mature enough to like understand that and make that decision. It's
Right.
when you buy 60 animals and then in 2 months and now you're trying to flip them all back to the market, then it's like, okay, there was a bit of irresponsibility there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's another thing to be aware of, I guess. Make sure you like them before you dive into them too deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, here's like a question I have. Like, what can we as breeders do or do better to, because I'd say there's like a 50-50 of where people are getting out of the industry these days. It's either, or maybe not getting out, I'm sorry, like of what happens where it's like me, where like I stumbled. I spent a lot of money on ball pythons. I stumbled, but I found my way and I saw the light. And then I continued on. I restructured the collection a little bit and I did it smartly. Or people that just get out and sell off entirely. Because I feel like
Mhm.
maybe that's not even a 50-50. I'd say there's a little more of the just the whole get out rather than the quick trip and finding your way. It's like
Mhm.
what can we do to keep the retention better? I don't know. Or was it because I'll say this all the time is like if you're gonna sell out that quickly, you should have never been in really the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard problem to solve. I I
Yeah.
I guess it's just, listening to our show, getting all these, getting all these ideas and, making sure you're thinking things through. And, I would say even like, if you think there's a project for you and it's going to be cool, get a lone animal, keep it for a while, see if you enjoy it, if it keeps your attention. If you find yourself being like, oh, this is a hassle, this is a pain, yeah, don't buy a bunch more, because it's not going to get easier with babies
Yeah.
come, hatching and things like that. So I think, there's just simple things people can do to make sure they're going to enjoy it and continue on. Like for me, I'll, I'll always probably have some kind of reptilian pet, and probably a few breeding projects as well. Sometimes I feel a little responsible for some things. Like I feel like, the a reason a lot of them are in the country is because I bred them, and I want to make sure that continues on, because sometimes you see breeders leave the hobby or pass away, and the projects disappear, and they produce thousands of them, and you're thinking, where are all these animals that were produced? And people just went,
Yeah.
oh, they're doing that. I don't want to do the same thing they're doing, because then I'll have to compete, or I'll have, it's like, well, I mean, there is something about having those backup projects, or people that have the animals that you have. And so, that was kind of one of the big things I wanted to do, is make sure that there were other people breeding them, so it wasn't just me, and we could have uh, those animals in the hobby for a very long time. But sometimes that's easier said than done, especially when people get, have that attitude of trade secrets, like they're not going to help people understand how to breed them, because then they become their competition. And that's another aspect I guess we haven't really hit on, is that
Yeah.
there's almost that competitive, like, withholding or something, because you don't want the people who are buying your animals to be your competition, which is exactly what happens when sell a project or a breeding pair to somebody. Is they're selling the same things you are to some extent. So, but there's room. There's a lot of people in the country, and
Yeah.
interest in reptiles is growing. So I don't think we need this fighting competitive nature. I think we can, get along and help each other and move things forward. And especially for things that aren't commonly kept, like we want more
Yeah.
of these more rare things, and people get more exposure to them, and then they see, oh, this is a doable thing, and maybe they get interested in something besides the big 5 or 10 species out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any other things that we haven't covered yet?
I don't know. I also just wanted to add, like, another reason I just feel passionately about this topic is because of like my humble beginnings into the reptile hobby, and how it's just grown into a real passion for me over the years. Like, I started just as a little kid with one snake, which became two snakes, and then it was hard to convince my parents to let me even get more, and then I kind of snuck more into the house, and now I have what I have today. So, I just love these animals so much that I hate to see, people not appreciate them the same
Right.
way I do. And
Sure.
that they're just kind of tossed around like a commodity to an extent, and sometimes kept irresponsibly, and things like that,
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's just
you know what the cure for that is? Get out and herp. Go see them in the wild. It
yeah,
just gives you an appreciation for what that animal actually is. It's not just showing up in a deli cup. It's out in the wild doing its thing. And if you see them in the wild, it just brings that appreciation up. Like I come home and I go, I've got to do better. Like what I'm doing is not sufficient for this species. Like I've seen them in the wild. Like I know what they
yeah,
have, access to, and how can I make their life better? How can I make it more like I saw in the wild, or, those kind of things. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think that makes you realize, or it reignites that passion that you had when you were a kid and you were discovering new things in the, whatever encyclopedia or reptile book you saw your first, or dinosaur book was where I saw my first reptiles in the back, that, and just got me so excited. And then, yeah, I made a ton of mistakes, and I you know, animals have died in my care because I didn't know what I was doing very well. And you know, mistakes still happen. I still lose animals from time to time. And but my passion and my excitement and my care for the animals is growing. You know, it's developing and it's becoming better. And I hope that's, you know, if you find yourself kind of stuck in a rut, go out and see them in the wild. You know, instead of buying that next pair of animals, use that to buy a plane ticket somewhere cool and go see the animals and doing what they do in the wild, and you'll reignite that passion. You'll get more excited about the things you're keeping.
Yeah.
And that's true even of those Big Five to Big Ten, you know,
Yeah,
however it fits, right? In
right.
terms of on the, you know, that not the most recent for me Australia trip, but the one before when we were on Eastern Queensland, that Barbata, and not to say Barbata are common, right? But you
Yeah.
know, the close relative of Viticeps, the bearded dragon, right? The number one, number two pet lizard or whatever.
Right.
Man, that was the coolest animal we saw on the whole trip. Just that
Yeah.
thing was insane, you know. And it's one of those. And I know you've seen Viticeps, right, in the wild
Yeah.
before.
Ton of
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
that it's just like they're amazing, right? It's
Oh
the
yeah.
magic of those animals that's actually lost because they are the, you know, number one or number two most common
Yep.
pet lizard, and now they're associated with on a leash wearing dragon wings and this sort of stuff or whatever. And it's
Sitting on
like,
a hammock.
no, those
Yeah.
things are amazing. Like
Yeah.
what they do, what they put up with, you know,
Oh yeah.
their design relative to their conditions and things. They're truly amazing, and that gets lost when we're looking at buckets of 20 of them, you know, and they're
Right.
in all these crazy colors.
Yep. And I think it kind of goes the same way. Like, I mean, you might talk to an Australian herper that's like, oh, it's just a bearded dragon, you know, drive past it. But like, I think if you can, you know, appreciate even the common stuff that you see all the time and just like watch them, see what they do. Like, I remember, you know, there's garter snakes all over around here, but I found this huge garter snake female, and I sat and watched her and was taking some pictures of her, and she did this weird tongue flick thing that I've never seen before. And it was like she was moving her tongue like almost in a spiral and doing this weird, you know, it was really cool. And I'm like, you know, if I would have just went, oh, that's a garter snake, I'm not going to mess with it, I wouldn't have seen that behavior. I wouldn't have, you know, been excited and had that passion reignited a little bit. So I think, you know, even then, like we went on that trip to South Australia and we saw around 40 shingleback skinks. You know, it was like
Wild.
they were
That's truly
everywhere.
wild.
It was incredible, you know, and I never got sick of seeing a shingleback skink. Like everyone was like, holy crap, it's a shingleback. Like pull over, you know, let's go, you know, get it off the road or go take a picture of it or whatever. It was always exciting because they're such cool animals, you know. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think when you get to the point where you're, oh, it's just another shingleback, like, no, you know, let's
You got to
refocus. Let's go
reassess.
back
Yeah,
and just
let's figure out why we're doing what we're doing.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think that's a good way to I know that's just reignited my passion to the nth degree, is to get out and see them in the wild. And I just love it. It's become, you know, almost second nature to just have a couple herb trips planned. And
Yeah.
you know, yeah, it's very cool. All right. Well, this is definitely a great topic, and I think it's important to consider. You know, let's
Yeah.
make sure we don't fall into those traps on either side. Like, let's have morals. Let's treat people coming up in the hobby with the respect that they deserve, and help them. You know, be mentors to them so they don't make
Yeah.
the same mistakes we did, or you know, that kind of thing. I think
If we're in this
great.
for the long run, we should want to continue to grow the hobby, not have people that are going to spend a ton of money and dump out in a year. It like, you know, because having that new person in the hobby is going to spark 5 more new people. Like it's
Yeah,
just a, you know, it's a trickle down effect. So
yeah,
the more people we get and that stay, the better it is for the hobby as a whole.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Why? I mean, it's always fun. That's the funnest part of going to reptile shows for me anymore, is to see my friends in the reptile hobby. You know, like
Yep.
to hear about their latest herb trip or what they're breeding or whatever. It's just cool. Even if I have no interest in keeping that species or you know, targeting that species in the wild, still cool to hear. Oh, I wanted to mention too. I was listening. Frank Colachico was on a couple of podcasts lately, and it reminded me of a point he made at the Gecko Symposium back at Tinley a few years back. He said, "Okay, how many people in the audience keep Rhacodactylus, the Leachianus or the what's the crested geckos? They're not Rhacodactylus anymore. They're Coralophus. Yeah. He's like, how many people keep them? And like most of the people in the audience, of course, had some form of, and they raised their hand. And he said, how many people have ever seen one in the wild? And like maybe 2 hands stayed up, out of 150 or whatever. So, I think that's a great point. Like, it just brings that to the next level when you can experience the animals you keep at your home in the wild. It just makes them all the more special, and it just it gets you more excited about doing well and keeping them happily and keeping them how you saw them and thriving in the wild. It's just cool.
Definitely.
All right, well, where can people find you?
You could find me on most social media platforms. It's Meteoric Serpents pretty much everywhere. YouTube, you could search it on there as well, or Colubrid Corruption, you could search that wherever you listen to podcasts as well. But that's where you can find me.
Nice. Yeah, I'll definitely be doing that and listening to your podcast. Check it out. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on. We kind of like to end if you've seen any cool things in herpetoculture or herpetology in the last little bit. What if you have anything that you're really excited about that you've seen lately. For me, I've gotten kind of on an Oedura kick after seeing so many cool species in Central Australia. And I was listening to a podcast where Oedura keeper was, producing some cool species and stuff. It got me really excited about Oedura. I just really, and then like looking into all the expansion of the species, like there's a lot of them out there and they're pretty neat lizards. So I just posted today some, well, when, but I posted some Marini velvet geckos, the Oedura larica that we saw around Kings Canyon. Spectacular. I mean, they're freaking purple and yellow, like just really cool. Wow. And good size too. Like they were an impressive size and just amazing colors that you just wouldn't expect to see on, out on a rock in the, in the middle of the desert. So very cool animals. So I'm on an Oedura kick lately, trying to learn all I can about those now. Yeah.
Nice.
How about you guys? Anything cool? Any cool podcasts you've listened to lately or guests you've had on your podcast that have gotten you excited?
I've had a lot of cool guests, I'll be honest. I mean, I'll throw the plug out there since we're on the NPR network. Colubrid Fest in September. If you're a Colubrid nerd or nut or whatever, if you enjoy colubrids, you should definitely be there. I will be there. I will have a table, even though I'll probably have very little production. I'll be there one way or another. So you will see me there. I hope to see a ton of people there because it's going to be even bigger and better than it was last year. So
that's cool. Where are they having that?
It's over in, it's Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah, it was in Indianapolis last year, but they changed venues.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna head down to the reptile talks. Cool. Barring any unfortunate situation, but yeah, I'll be down in California for those. I'm excited to go see those. So I figured it's a good thing to support. It's middle of May, I think the 16th, 15th, 16th, somewhere in there. That weekend, in the middle of May, and in the Anaheim area. So you can go hit Disneyland if you're so inclined and go listen to some reptile talks. But I'd encourage the listeners to head out there. And if you're on my way from northern Utah and you want to go along, we can split some gas money. Let me know. All right. Got anything else, Rob? Or we
one thing that's cool that you'll appreciate, I think, because it'll take you back to your own sort of trip narrative days, is if you go to pingleton.com, Mike's old website from the mid-90s. I think it was most recently updated going on 10 years ago, but he has actually a whole bunch of trips that are written up more briefly than what you used to do, but kind of trip narrative stuff when there's dozens of them on there. Just really cool to flick through and check them out. So I'd recommend that.
Nice. I ran across one as well. It was more recent one too, like an Australian keeper. I don't remember it, so I don't know why I'm bringing it up. But it was, it was kind of focused around Gahaira, and that's another cool gecko group that I've just really come to appreciate. I had a picture of a Gahaira. It was like this almost white, patternless on a red river gum, those white eucalyptus trees, and it just like crazy, like a white gecko on a white tree, kind of neat thing. And we took pictures of them, and I sent pictures to I sent them to Chris Jolly, who wrote the book, and I said, what species is this? I'm having a hard time. He's like, did you get a DNA sample? That's about the only way to know with some of those. Like there's some that just look identical, and the only way to differentiate them is through DNA. So I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. But yeah, this narrative went through different trips to find Gahaira, and so you probably find it like blog post on Gahaira or something on just Google that. But
that's definitely
it's very cool.
That's one to choose. I think I'm working the other way. Talk about charismatic versus, I respect the heck out of that. Mine would be considered very gauche as opposed to that.
Right. Yeah. I actually probably find it while we're chatting here. But yeah, I think Wes Reed Photography. I think that was it. Okay. But yeah, he goes. He must be doing some kind of study or something on Gahaira, because it's interesting that, but there's some gorgeous species of Gahaira out there that are just really unique. And we saw a bunch of those in the Northern Territory in Darwin area. And then when I was in the Central Australia on that trip, we saw very similar looking species, but completely different species, but they look the same as a lot of the ones up in the northern or far north. And it was crazy. Yeah. Just the diversity of Gahaira is incredible, especially considering they look identical. You can't differentiate them other than by DNA. So that was kind of fun, but cool stuff all around. I was just looking at Ross McGibbon's pictures, and he's got some stuff from like Whyalla area, that South Australia area where we went. So it kind of brought back some fun memories. I'm like, man, those rocks look familiar. I wonder if, yep, sure enough, that's where we were. So pretty fun. But I don't know, lots of good stuff out there. Again, I listened to some fun interviews with Frank Colachico and some of his adventures. He's been putting out some videos lately. Yeah,
I got the other one queued up to listen to, but yeah, I agree with you. Really good. I love his perspective. We had him on going on maybe, Joe, what you're talking about, a year, 18 months ago, something like that. And it's just a super sweet guy, super interesting, always makes it compelling. It does really good, compelling to get folks out in the field and check it out.
Right. And also to not just focus on the popular, the stuff that everybody, like, he's out there looking at some really obscure things, and I guess you can get to the opposite end of the spectrum where only the new stuff will excite you. And I don't know that I want to be on that far end of the spectrum either, like, I can't get excited by the common stuff. I just have to have this ultra rare stuff. But, it is what it is. And I think we all kind of have that to some extent. Like, I want to see something new rather than just going back to the same place and seeing all the same things. So I don't know. It's a balance, I guess. But yeah, he's talking species I've never heard of, or that kind of thing. Little obscure geckos from South Africa or something. You're like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Or discovering new ones in Oman or something.
Right.
Yeah. So check out his interviews, and his videos are really cool, like next level videos. I think that was kind of what the Not Another Reptile podcast, Matt really hit on that, of how cool his videos are and stuff. Yeah, his Western Australia trip was phenomenal. Yeah, I was jealous of some of the things they found, like that multifasciata, the Centralian blue tongue skink sitting in the waterfalls in Dale's Gorge. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would have given a right arm to see that. But anyway. All right. Well, we will thank Eric and Owen and the NPR crew for hosting our podcast, and we will say farewell, and we'll see you again next week for Reptile Fight Club.
Fight Club.
Thanks, guys.